Mandalee, thank you for joining me. Just a quick few questions for you relating to the summit presentation you gave yesterday. First, why is nutrition so important when we talk about food security?
Look, nutrition is absolutely fundamental to human health. Poor diets represent about 6% of the total burden of disease. If we don't get nutrition correct, we do not have sufficient nutritious food available for the population, and they're two of the primary components of food security. Nutrition is important for human health. At the moment we are suffering an obesity epidemic that is leading to increased prevalence of chronic disease, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, some forms of cancer. In the next 10 to 15 years, it's modelled that we will need to double the amount of money currently spent on the ill health system in Australia. So if all of us are going to want to have our triple bypasses, we are going to have to double the amount of money spent on hospitals. In the states where that information has been formulated, we know that that will take up the majority of the state's budget in the next 10 to 15 years. There won't be any money left for education systems or other essential services that government provides, let alone R&D for agriculture. So it's a really critical point in terms of economic, social and broader environmental issues to ensure that we have adequate nutritious food for all Australians.
Great, thank you for that. And I also wanted to talk about energy-dense foods and the challenges in relation to them providing nutrition.
Yeah.
And how do we tackle that?
Okay. Look, the issue is that currently we have enough food. What we are really lacking is enough quality food. In my presentation, I talked about the types of foods that we need to eat more of to provide a nutritious diet that provides the nutrients we need in the less energy available, which is important for obesity, but also that describes dietary patterns that are consistent for promotion of health and well-being and reduce risk of the chronic diseases, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and some forms of cancers. So there's some foods we need to eat more of. The challenge is we're already eating enough. The challenge is, I hope you netted this, the challenge is we're already eating too much. Now we're not eating, some people seem to think here, 2 or 3 times too much. Every day we're just eating a small amount of additional kilojoules, and over time we might put on an extra kilogram, 2, 3 kilograms a year, and that leads to obesity in midlife. So we really need to look at the foods that are not essential for health, that we're already consuming too many of. Now we know that for the average Australian adult, about 35% of our total energy intake is coming from energy-dense, nutrient-poor foods that are not required for health. These are things like sugar-sweetened beverages, confectionery, biscuits, the types of pastry products that have represented a huge increase in energy intake over the last 20 years. We need to replace those by more nutritious foods, fruit, vegetables, whole grain breads and cereals, lean meats, poultry, fish, legumes, and dairy products, particularly reduced fat dairy products. If we do that, we'll have more nutritious diet, but we'll also have a reduced prevalence of obesity and chronic diseases, and that's essential for the broader health of society as well as individuals.
And so that sort of touches on my last question, which was the question that you raised at the end of your presentation, which is, does obesity represent a failure of the current free market system? And you know, what can we do about it?
Yes, we were asked to provide some provocative proposals, so that was one of mine. Look, a market systems are seen to fail when externalities are not taken into consideration in assessing true costs. Now, at this conference, we've heard a lot about the environment and environmental degradation not being factored into the costs of food production, but the same thing happens with poor health. Poor health is a byproduct of a market system that encourages the production of energy-dense, nutrient-poor foods, which are primarily the ones with added fat, added sugar and added salt. It's these foods that are used to add value to the foods through the food chain. They're the foods that are most readily available, most readily marketed and easier to overconsume. Now, if you like, an easy way of looking at this is that obesity is an unintended byproduct of the current market system associated with food production. And we really do need to start addressing the externalities, which is the unintended byproduct of the current food system, if we're going to create a society that's equitable and healthy into the future.
Thank you.
Okay.